You are listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 7th of October 2025 on Monocle Radio. Hello and welcome to The Briefing, broadcasting live from Studio One here at Midori House in London. I'm Chris Chermak. Coming up on today's program, Munich is the latest airport forced to respond to drones. Monocle's Alexis Self is joining us. How should Europe respond, Lex?
Well, technology is the answer, I think, and coordination.
We will hear more from you, Lex, about all of that in just a moment. We'll also head to Paris for a look at Chanel's hotly anticipated debut performance of Mathieu Blasi. Our own Sophie Grove was there. And after that, we are joined by Monocle's Carlotta Ribello. Carlotta, you are in Munich.
Yes, I'm in Munich, and it was a safe landing for Expo Real, one of the largest trade fairs for property and investment. And we'll be discovering why, despite global uncertainty, real estate continues to have strategic value and a strategic role.
All that coming up right here on The Briefing with me, Chris Chermak. Welcome to The Briefing. Happy Tuesday, everyone. And the ongoing saga over drones interrupting flights at European airports played out most recently in Munich this week, forcing authorities there to install a laser to ward them off, and once again shining a spotlight on Europe's defense, its technology, whether it can ward off these kinds of attacks, not just on the traditional battlefield, but hybrid warfare, if you will, a space that Russia has been specializing in for quite a while. And joining me now, right here in the studio to talk about all of this, is Monocle's foreign editor, Alexis Self. Are we happy to fly these days, Lex? It is a strange atmosphere out there.
Yes, it's concerning, of course, and we've seen Copenhagen and Munich airports shut down due to drone incursions. I think we'll probably see more of this in the future, but if you cast your mind back to 10 years ago, a different kind of security threat was present in air travel, and they had to change the way security protocol ran. Different technology was introduced. I think we're probably going to see more of that. I think, this hybrid warfare has been going on for a while. There was lots of different threats last year. There was arson attacks on infrastructure across Europe. There was an apparent plot to bomb cargo planes, to put bombs in DHL parcels. So this isn't necessarily new, and actually I think you saw the response in Denmark and Germany being quite quick. I mean, obviously there was chaos because of the way that air travel exists on such tight timetables.
Even a minute of change can impact the whole schedule. But yes, it was a quick response.
Yeah, and I think hybrid warfare in this sense, targeting civilian infrastructure, is a kind of form of terrorism in that it's supposed to spread panic and, prod at weak spots security-wise. I think it's been chaotic, but it's not been as chaotic as it might have been. And I think that that's reassuring, as is the fact that the authorities seem to be coming up with ways of combating this or preventing it in the future.
It is interesting at the same time that in some ways it seems like they're having to come up with this on the fly. I mean, you're seeing this sort of hybrid warfare going from military to civilian infrastructure that is having to cope with it. But we're also just seeing this question, right, of whether Europe is really ready to respond to this in a coherent manner, in a way that really shows that they're on top of it. I mean, there was a German media report today talking about the German military, the Bundeswehr, being basically woefully unprepared for hybrid warfare and responding to drones. So where does Europe go from here?
Yeah, I think part of that rhetoric is designed to mobilize people, mobilize resources, and introduce a sense of urgency into preparation for these kind of things. It's funny. I received PR emails after the closures in Copenhagen and Munich by manufacturers of laser technology, for example. One even touting our lasers are the ones that have been installed in Munich. So there's also kind of money-making operation here. You know, there's companies that are receiving some of the money that is being generated and released into the European security industry. Whether, you know, as I said before, whether or not Europe is ready, I mean, you're ready until you aren't. I mean, there's lots of plots being foiled, and I think, you know, a few years ago in the UK we had this huge cause célèbre where a single drone, or what was purported to be a drone, shut down Gatwick for you know, a long time, and it was completely chaotic in the middle of the summer. And I think a response to that has been that in the UK, at least, you know, no UAVs, to give them their technical name, are allowed anywhere near airports, and actually they're restricted in far more places these days, which actually I would say I'm in favour of, given, you know, not just the fact that they are a security threat, but an offence to the senses.
And also, just as you say, how easy it is. I mean, that's what's incredible about this, the kind of havoc that one drone at an airport can cause for, like, understandable reasons. But I think what's interesting of what you said there as well is, there are these companies, there is the technology is out there. There's a lot of companies working on developing all of this stuff. But then, as you said at the top as well, it's technology and it's coordination. So how is the coordination side of this going in Europe?
Yeah, so last week I was in Brussels interviewing Kaja Kallas, who is essentially the bloc's foreign minister, but also she's responsible for kind of marshalling this effort of security cooperation that's really ramping up over the past year, and especially as a response to Washington's kind of step back from European security. So I met her last week on Monday, and we talked a lot about this. And she was about to head into back-to-back summits, the biggest one in Copenhagen, just after the drone, the kind of drone interruption.
Yeah, it was a strange time to have all these European leaders descending on Copenhagen.
Or perhaps a pertinent time. Look, they're you know, she's obviously going to be very strident and about the effectiveness of this new effort, the money that's involved. I think we did see in Copenhagen last week agreement on some core ideas, this and at least kind of positive affirmation for this idea of a drone wall and more aerial defence on NATO and the EU's eastern flank, which I think we will start to see a kind of a shield coming in, or at least, you know, I think part of the problem, not just with drones, but also airspace violation by Russian jets, is that there hasn't been a common, you know, there isn't a protocol for response. So different NATO, EU countries, you know, most of those countries there are members of both NATO and the EU. They don't have a common response mechanism or protocol for you know, meeting these violations, and therefore it's a kind of muddled response, which plays into the hands of Russia, or a kind of a bad actor who's looking to probe and, you know, kind of spread discord and disunity. If different people are responding in different ways, then that doesn't present a united front. So I think a big part of these meetings last week, and also heading into the end of this month, is coming up with, you know, security protocol in that sense.
That unified response will be important going forward. Just finally, Lex, before we let you go, you are the editor of the current affairs section of Monocle. You just had the November magazine going to print. Just tell us a bit about what you've been working on. Kaja Kallas, obviously, EU's top diplomat.
Yeah, so very pertinent to our discussion. That interview with Kaja Kallas, and she was very open about a lot of things, about European security, about Ukraine, about Gaza as well, which she's just come out yesterday and said that the EU must have a role in post-war Gaza. So there's that interview, and then also alongside that, there's a big piece about Poland, and my colleague Julia Jen got great access to speak to the Polish defense minister and some high-level politicians and security experts in Poland about how that country is attempting to meet threats like this, and also its ambitions to become Europe and the EU's largest, the EU and Europe outside Russia's largest army.
Thanks very much. We look forward to reading that in the November issue, a little while away, but we work, ahead of time here. Lex Self, Monocle's foreign editor, thank you very much for joining us. And now here's Monica Lillis with the day's other news headlines.
Thanks, Chris. Today marks 2 years since Hamas's attack on Israel, killing 1,200 people and kidnapping over 250 more. International talks to secure a ceasefire have so far been unsuccessful, though negotiations are ongoing in Egypt to end Israel's war in Gaza, that has killed over 67,000 Palestinians. Former French Prime Minister Edouard Philippe has called on his one-time boss, President Emmanuel Macron, to resign and bring forward 2027's elections. The recommendation is one of many from Macron's allies, deepening the French president's political turmoil, which has seen no less than 5 prime ministers occupy Hôtel Matignon. Airbus's A320 family of planes have officially overtaken the Boeing 737 as the most delivered jetliner in history. The loss of Boeing's decade-held record marks a significant shift in the jostling for market share between the plane-maker giants. Airbus is now expanding production in the US and China. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Chris.
Thanks very much, Monica. It has been a month of fashion firsts with new designers at new brands, and last night marked the debut of Mathieu Blazy at Chanel, closing out Paris Fashion Week with what by all accounts was a barnstormer of a show. But to get the lowdown from someone who was actually at the event, we will cross to Paris now to speak with Sophie Grove, editor of Monocle's sister publication, Confect. Sophie, you are speaking to us from a train platform because you're almost about to get back to London. But what was last night like?
Well, we're still basking in some of the Chanel good vibes because it was a real spectacular event, really. I mean, a sense of real awe with the set. It was a kind of planetary universe in the Grand Palais. This wonderful kind of like solar system just kind of suspended above this kind of inky black floor. And it really felt kind of wonderfully otherworldly and just amazing stepping in there.
It does show this was about presentation as much as the fashion, wasn't it, Sophie? Which I guess fits into this whole, the hype, the build-up to this moment of Mathieu Blazy's performance. Did it match the hype?
Well, the hype was so incredibly intense, and there was so much secrecy and so much speculation that then when it did come, I think hopes were very high, but so was the kind of like intensity and sense of suspense. So I think that atmosphere really fed into the feeling of the show, but also that I think it was very well orchestrated. It had a sublime element, a feeling of like kind of, the tectonic plates of fashion shifting in that moment inside the Grand Palais. And then the collections emerged. It was really significant because the first look was actually quite a humble and beautiful grey suit, a trouser suit with a cropped little jacket and gold buttons. Almost felt like a profound vision because in a way it reminded you that was what Coco Chanel was all about. It was about humble materials, comfort, appropriating menswear in a moment where women were really wearing corsets and sort of, very uncomfortable clothes. And so you saw this sense of like reference to that past and that simplicity in the origins of the brand. And then it got going and there was just a wonderful sense of celebration. This sort of flamenco theme crept in at the end with these beautiful, voluminous skirts made from feathers. I mean, thousands of hours of hands, of craftsmanship, of these artisans working on those pieces was really evident. So it had this beauty, this profound beauty and sense of celebration.
And Sophie, you mentioned Coco Chanel there, of course, and this shows, Mathieu Blazy really had quite the legacy to follow at Chanel. I understand he's only the fourth designer in its history. How did he then, you mentioned one of the outfits at the start, but do you feel that he matched this sort of legacy with what he wants to do with the brand?
Well, yeah, he said he wants to have fun, but you can see that he's contending with an incredibly large company, very strong history, and these codes that were kind of cemented into place, really, by Karl Lagerfeld, who was, playing with the Chanel double C, the sense of like the little black dress, the boucle suit. Some of these things have become so entrenched. It was almost shocking to see him taking those brands off. Sorry, I'm very much in the station. And there was really a lack of sort of discernible Chanel branding on his collections. He's reimagining the Chanel handbags, which I think a lot of people would just see as kind of sacrilegious. But at the same time, what he was presenting was incredibly beautiful, toned down and kind of a real sense of something new, a modern vision of the brand. And I think when the penny drops and some of the people get used to this idea that it's a new era, it's a new vision in charge, I think what we're going to see is something fresh and really much in the spirit of what Chanel's all about, which is, from the very earliest moment of the brand, about innovation and throwing out the rules.
Just finally then, Sophie, before we let you catch that train that we can hear in the background, you talked about the secrecy ahead of this show as well. This had been kept under wraps for most of the year. Now that it's here, now that Mathieu Blazy has presented himself to the world stage at Chanel, where does he kind of go from here? Is he now out in the open? This is who he is.
Exactly. It's interesting that the show felt a bit like a kind of mood board because there was so much going on. It was in 3 acts and not necessarily discernible to the audience, but it had a kind of intellectual arc to it. But it felt like a real kind of smorgasbord of ideas, just so much going on. I think what people will expect from him in his next act is a bit more clarity and a little bit more of a collection, rather than this riot of energy and ideas. And I think what would expect, it's a lot of hard work. It's a huge, huge house with so many different threads to it and so many different maisons attached to it. It's an incredibly huge challenge for a 41-year-old human, any human. So I think it will be interesting to see how he deals with that and how he digests it and how his vision filters through such a huge organization and then, comes out into the boutiques.
Going from a mood board to a collection. Love that. Sophie Grove, editor of Confect, thank you very much for joining us. We will let you catch that train. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. You're back with The Briefing. I'm Chris Chermak, and we will cross over to Munich now, where Europe's largest real estate fair is underway, and our very own Carlotta Rebello, Monocle's senior foreign correspondent and producer of The Urbanist, is in place amid all of the hubbub, to borrow a phrase from our Andrew Muller. Carlotta, you got through all the drones we were talking about at the top of the show.
Yes, I did get through the drones, Chris, with no issues whatsoever. Not sure if it's a mixture of security measures in place or if the drones are just quiet for now, but you wouldn't have guessed any of the chaos that had been at Munich airport earlier in this week.
Okay, so Carlotta, you made it through the drones. That is good news. I guess the lasers that are in place are doing the trick. So where did you get to? What exactly is this Expo Real?
Yes, so I'm at the München Messe, which I'm sure you're familiar with, Chris. And of course, Germany is known for organizing great trade fairs. So it makes sense that one of the largest property and investment trade fairs in the world is happening here. Around 40,000 people are expected to go through these corridors over the course of 3 days. We're talking about 600-something speakers in the official conference program, over 80 exhibitors from around the world. So it is busy, as you can probably probably hear in the background this lunchtime a lot of conversations happening as people are filtering out from the main auditorium.
It is sounding very busy over there. And yes, Germany, I think, puts on a pretty good trade fair. We go to quite a few of them, Carlotta. I know you've been to quite a few. What are the trends developing on this one?
It is quite interesting to see, actually. I don't know if it's a mixture of the location with also being a bit later in the year. We were earlier in the year at MIPIM, and that's in March, which kind of sets the tone for the months ahead. And now, of course, people are gearing to the end of this quarter and looking ahead to 2026. But one of the main trends that actually stuck out to me, not just in the program yesterday, but a lot of the exhibitions and stands here today as well, it's on logistics. And traditionally, we would see this sort of investment coming from logistics and transport companies, but actually more and more property investment firms and developers are betting on logistics. Having a logistics hub is not just a lucrative business, but it's actually part of the solution to, getting goods to our cities, getting people from A to B, making us more connected. So perhaps more surprising compared to what we've seen back in March, logistics is high on the agenda. Also, again, and not as surprising, a lot of focus on luxury hospitality. And here we've been seeing not just some of the traditional players like Hyatt, for example, that are here, but a few others that are not traditionally luxury or hospitality, rather, players, but that are making steps into investing into that field. So they're taking Expo Real as a chance to make some of those deals happen.
So stepping into luxury at a time where it must be said there is some uncertainty in the real estate market, as there is in, frankly, every, avenue of the economy these days in lots of parts of the world. How is that playing out at the conference itself?
It is actually a really good question, Chris, because that's one of the main things we heard this morning. There was a huge session this morning all about the volatility of the markets and how to deal with uncertainty. And one of the things that came out is how Europe remains a key contributor to real estate, nearly $400 trillion global value. And this is, real estate is classed as one of the world's most valuable asset classes. By a wide margin. And, Germany is one of the is the fourth most valuable real estate market in the world. So again, Europe keeps leading on this trend. We have Germany, the UK, France, Italy, Spain, and the Netherlands all in the top. So those are Europe's six largest markets, accounting for over $55 trillion when it comes to the global real estate wealth. That's just to give you some numbers and the scale of, the money going through these corridors here, and why this is such an important moment to continue to push ahead with investment and with deals despite that uncertainty.
And just finally then, I guess another aspect almost of the uncertainty, going to the other end of the market. If you were talking about luxury hospitality before, you've also attended talks on perhaps those who need to join with others, co-living spaces, student housing, things like that are also on the agenda there.
Very much so. And, this is not a trade fair that focuses on just one segment. We see a lot of conversations and a lot of exhibitors from all segments. And more it becomes evident that the way forward for cities is to diversify and not to invest just in one solution. There was a big session on co-living and student housing, and actually highlighting how those can be both put together but also separate. There is co-living for adults. There's co-living for elderly people. For people, there was an example about single parent co-living solutions. But also earlier, I was speaking with some of the members from SARC, and this is a developer from Saudi Arabia. And in their case, they specialize in building to rent, but also on workers' housing. So while there's all this talk about, delivering beautiful neighborhoods at a high class level and for big companies, a focus as well on the people building those big neighborhoods and properties, and making sure that workers' housing is not just dignified, but that it exudes all these points of quality of life, of neighborhood life, of community that we want to see throughout all levels and all types of properties.
Monocle's senior foreign correspondent and producer of The Urbanist, Carlotta Ribello. Thank you very much for joining us and enjoy the expo. That's all the time we have for this edition of The Briefing. It was produced by Hassan Anderson. Our researcher was Joanna Moser and our studio manager was Lily Austin. The Briefing is back tomorrow at the same time. I'm Chris Turmack. Goodbye and thanks for listening.